Hello, my amazing children. This is Grandma Carla. We are back with the very last chapter. I am sorry to see this book end. This is an amazing book by Mildred A.Martin, a collection of missionary stories with the Millers. So here we're reading the last chapter, Uncle Ralph and the Moose. And this happens up in this area. This is Canada. Okay, so all of Canada up here is where this story takes place. Uncle Ralph and the Moose. Timmy had finished eating his potatoes and placed his fork neatly at the edge of his plate. While the rest of the Miller family talked over their day's happenings, he sat silently, lost in thought. Why doesn't anyone from our church ever go to be a missionary in other countries? He asked suddenly. All the Millers turned to look at Timmy in surprise. Why, Timmy, what do you mean? Dad said. Well, all these stories Mom has been telling us. He hesitated. There should be missionaries from our church, too, shouldn't there? You're right, Timmy, his father replied. God expects each one of us who believe in Jesus to be a missionary. Some of us are missionaries here, where we live right now. But there are people among our own family and friends who have gone to foreign countries to be missionaries too. How about Uncle Steve and Aunt Rosa and the cousins, Mama suggested. They are missionaries in Ireland, you know. And Brother Ron Border and his family, remember how they spent a year in France? Don't forget Sister Brenda, Peter spoke up. She was your teacher when you were in first grade, Timmy, and now she has gone to Belize to teach children there. She's the one who sent us the story about Patrona and the angel. And there's Miriam Summers, too, Sharon added. She lives way far over in Kenya with the mission there. Your grandpa, William McGrath, might be the busiest missionary on our earth, Mama went on with a smile. He has started mission churches in Costa Rica, Ireland, and New Mexico. He spent 2 years teaching and preaching in Alaska, and he still travels all over the United States to preach. Tonight he will be preaching in Oregon, and we must not forget to pray for him. Tonight, Timmy, you will be seeing another real live missionary, Dad stated. After supper, we are planning to go visit Great-Grandma Alice, and you can meet at her house. You can meet him at her house, so meeting the missionary at Great-Grandma Alice's house. Who is it? All 4 Miller children asked it at once. Their parents smiled mysteriously. Wait and see, was all Dad would say. When the Millers walked into Grandma Alice's house, and an hour later, a smiling man and woman rose from the couch to greet them. Peter and Timmy stared at the couple. I know I've seen them before, Peter thought. It's Uncle Ralph and Aunt Carolyn, Sharon squealed happily. My, we haven't seen you in several years. Yes, it's been a long time, Aunt Carolyn said, coming forward to kiss her niece. I don't suppose your younger children remember us at all, and we've never seen this one. Is this Laura? Children, this is my Aunt Carolyn and Uncle Ralph, their mother explained to the Miller children. So they are your great-aunt and great-uncle, and they are missionaries in Canada. Laura gazed wide-eyed at these relatives whom she had never seen before. Real live missionaries, just like in Mama's stories? She climbed onto her mother's lap as the family took seats around Great-Grandma's cozy living room. Well, Ralph, why don't you tell these children some stories? Great-Grandma suggested briskly. You boys would probably like to hear about a plane crash, wouldn't you? Uncle Ralph chuckled, looking at Peter and Timmy as they sat side by side on Great-Grandma's big leather footstool. I spent many years as a bush pilot, flying planes for the Northern Light Gospel Mission, he went on. The Cree Indians used to call me Mbimish Sewininin, which means man who flies. All the mission stations were built on the shores of lakes deep in the wild woods of Western Ontario. Most of them could not be reached by any road, so the only way to bring in people or supplies was by airplane. I used to say I fly everything, even kitchen sinks. Quite a few times I had to carry live goats in my plane so that the missionaries' children would have fresh milk to drink. How did goats behave in an airplane? Peter was curious. Well, I tied them fast and piled hay bales all around them, Uncle Ralph replied, and they flew more quietly than some people do. We lived at the Red Lake Mission, and I was almost home one evening when the trouble started. I was flying a little Cessna 180 with 2 fuel tanks, one in each wing. Usually when one tank got empty, I had only to flip a switch and start using gas from the other tank. But that evening, when I tried to switch tanks, my engine sputtered and died in midair. Somehow the carburetor had become unlocked, which kept the fuel from flowing into the engine. Now, boys, can you guess what happens if an airplane engine stops when you are in the air? I suppose you'd come down, Timmy answered. Yes, there is only one way to go, and that is down. Uncle Ralph continued. Landing on a lake would have been the best thing to do, but there were no lakes near enough. I was only 1,500 feet up and rapidly losing altitude. Another experienced bush pilot had once given me this advice. If you ever need to crash land your plane in the trees, pick the thickest trees around. I thought of his words now as I tried to guide the sinking plane. Ahead was a spot where the tops of the jack pine trees looked thick and fairly level. Carefully, I banked the plane around and aimed it toward that spot. Down, down glided the plane till it was almost touching the trees. Lord, this is up to you, I prayed hastily as I pulled back on the controls. Swish, crackle, the pontoons began to chop through the treetops. I guess I could get hurt, I remember thinking as the Cessna descended into the trees with an awful crashing and snapping of broken branches. Bang! One propeller hit a tree trunk and stopped. Slowly, the plane tilted and settled down between trees with the tip of one pontoon touching the ground, and all was quiet. I was still strapped into my seat and completely unhurt. Not even a scratch. I bowed my head in a prayer of thanksgiving. Then, unbuckling my seatbelt, I climbed out of the door and down to the pontoon. From there, I could jump to the ground. It was already 6:30 in the evening, and we usually didn't fly after dark, so I knew I would need to wait until morning for rescue. I gathered dry wood and made a fire to cook some food from my emergency kit. Darkness fell as I sat by my campfire, and I felt very small and alone there in that wild forest. Suddenly, I heard a sound that made me snap to attention. A large animal was coming through the trees. Humph, humph, came a grunting call, and I knew just what it meant. A bull moose was walking around not far away. It was September, mating season for the moose, and a bull could be dangerous. Every bull moose jealously guarded his territory against strangers, and I could not expect any mercy from this one. A bull moose might even weigh 1,200 pounds. Even the Indians stayed far away from them in September. Quickly putting out my fire, I swung myself back up onto the pontoon hanging down from the plane. Climbing into the plane, I unrolled my sleeping bag as well as I could and prepared to spend the night there. Humph, humph, the challenging grunt sounded again from below. I had climbed up to safety just in time. Angrily, the large moose threw back his head and bellowed like a bull. I shivered. Sorry, old fellow, I didn't mean to crash into your territory, I thought. As the night wore on, the bull moose kept tramping back and forth through the woods beneath my plane, as if he hoped that I would come down. About every half hour he bellowed horribly again. It was midnight before he finally gave up and went crashing away, allowing me to get some sleep. What happened next? How did you get home? Peter answered. In the morning, Uncle Ralph went on, I climbed down from the plane with an axe, a compass, and some matches. Using the compass, I began walking north toward the nearest lake. With my axe, I chopped a nick in some trees as I passed to mark a trail back to where the plane hung in the trees. It was only a mile and a half to the lake, but those woods were so thick that the hike took 3 hours. I found blueberries to eat along the way, though, and I was so thankful that I didn't meet an enemy, the moose. When I reached the lake shore, I made a big fire with lots of smoke. Soon, a rescue plane spotted my signal from the air, and I was safely on my way home. Later, we were able to return for my airplane, drag it to the lake, repair it, and fly away again. The Miller children stared at Uncle Ralph with their faces filled with awe. Such an adventure! What other stories might this man have to tell? How many years did you spend with the Northern Light Gospel Mission? Sharon asked. 32 years, the strongly built missionary replied. I have been a pilot for most of those years, and in 1982 I was ordained to the ministry too. Did you know Alvin Frey up there in Canada? Asked Peter. Mom told us some stories about him. Yes, we worked together with Alvin too, Uncle Ralph answered. Your Aunt Caroline was the nurse who took care of him when he was burned on the airplane trip from Red Lake to the big city hospital. We were both along on that trip to take him to Winnipeg. Did your mother tell you about the time his tractor fell through the ice too? Yes, she did, the Miller children nodded. His life has been spared by God more than once, Uncle Ralph said solemnly, and so has mine. A missionary's life involves some danger and adventure, and a lot of just plain hard work. I don't know what God has planned for you children, but if you follow His leading, you will always be glad you did. There's no place better than the place where the Lord calls you. Historical note. Uncle Ralph in this story is Ralph Hartman of Ear Falls, Ontario. At the time of this writing, he has been a missionary to the Cree Indians for 32 years. He is the author's uncle. And that is the end of this amazing compilation of missionary stories with the Millers. And I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I have. This is Grandma Carla, and I love you.